About 2 months ago, my grandmother told me she was pregnant and having a baby. She lay down in the hospital bed that we had to put in her room, woke up from her sleep, and abruptly declared her pregnancy. She is 88 years old. As you can probably imagine, the reactions in the room varied drastically. My brother and I looked at each other, not knowing what to say or do. We initially dealt with my grandmother's dementia through the lens of humor, trying to avoid all of the negative feelings that come inside us when we see her lose herself. But humor wasn't working for us anymore. Ever since she started forgetting our names and our birthdays, everything started to become more real. When I talked about the pregnancy declaration with my mom, she told me that she couldn't pretend like it wasn't happening anymore, that trying to cope through finding a positive side of things wasn't working. My dad has always been a very settled person. He knows what is happening, why it is happening, and that we can't and shouldn't try to fix it. But this was tough on him too. The question here is, what happens now? How can I deal with a person who has not only become a stranger, but isn't aware of the fact that she's become a stranger? I have been dealing with my grandmother's dementia for about 3 years now. Day by day, I see this woman deteriorate through my own eyes because she can't recognize her reality anymore. But I'm also not a doctor, or a psychologist, or anybody who knows the physiological side of dementia. I'm a granddaughter. I'm an incapable family member, the one who just gets things explained over and over again. And this is what I have learned from having to stand in a corner and see this condition develop firsthand. Now, context is very important in this scenario. I myself didn't know much about dementia until I had to spend time with it during every family lunch. The National Institute of Aging defines dementia as the loss of cognitive functioning. But what is cognitive functioning? It has 3 main abilities: thinking, remembering, and reasoning. There are over 500,000 people in Mexico with diagnosed dementia as of 2015. And 64% of those are women. Dementia is a condition that deteriorates a person's daily life. Their emotions change. Their conversations become repetitive and confusing. And more importantly, their personalities change as well. A person with dementia goes through multiple stages. A mild stage of the process is forgetting unimportant things. For example, I remember when my grandmother used to tell us that every single food that we put on the table during lunch was the first time that she had ever tried that food. Once it was paella. She's from Spain. Once it was lamb chops. We literally ate that for Christmas 3 months ago. And once it was arepas. She's literally lived in Venezuela for over 40 years. A more severe stage of dementia is losing abilities that deteriorate your life rapidly, such as not being able to feed yourself or not being able to drink water. As of December, the nurses that take care of my grandma are the ones that cook and feed for her because she can't do it on her own anymore. And this is a sippy cup. The sippy cup that my 2-year-old cousin uses and drags all over Barcelona, drinking juice and water in it, and she never lets go of it. It is also the sippy cup that my family and I discovered is the only way for my grandmother to be hydrated. Because if she doesn't use a cup like this one, she spills water all over herself. As months and months go by, dementia strips my grandmother from her life, from forgetting paella to having to use a sippy cup. Now, when I looked at conferences about dementia, I encountered the following titles. Dementia is preventable through your lifestyle. Start now. What you can do to prevent Alzheimer's or disrupting dementia. And while these are some fantastic talks to learn about the subject, I only have one question for myself. What am I supposed to do when dementia is already here? What happens when dementia happens to the people that you love? What happens when she starts to forget who I am? Or even worse, what happens when I start to forget how she was before? Everybody who encounters this condition will treat it differently, especially because of the diversity of stages and the diversity of reactions that can happen when dementia is in the picture. And I can't give you medical advice on that, but I can guarantee you one thing. Seeing dementia is not a pretty thing. In fact, it is torturous, dreadful, and dehumanizing. There are 2 words of advice that everybody tells you when dementia is in the picture. Be patient. Patient with what? With the most vulnerable process that a person can go through? With a disease that strips family members from their loved ones? With the agonizing pain of seeing your 88-year-old grandmother think she is pregnant because she can't recognize her own room? Be patient. I disagree. And here is why. It isn't enough. Patience isn't enough to improve our relationships with people with dementia. We are constantly fed this idea that our reactions have to be perfect. Which, by the way, only makes your reactions worse and your remorse even stronger. Because when dementia is in the picture, perfect patience will never be achieved, and things have to be said by what they are. So, here's my version of that advice. Number 1, people with dementia are deteriorating, and that is a fact. But they are not any less human, or any less deserving of love. They were once like us too. This is a very bittersweet phrase for me. Every time that my grandmother blows out another person's birthday candles, or forgets that she's living in Mexico instead of Venezuela, it helps me to remember that there is a version of this grandmother that was just like me. She used to be 17 like me, and she would hang out with her friends just like I do. And she could work, she could paint, she could go to the beach, make a Christmas dinner, remember someone's favorite food and make them. Go to the supermarket, let alone do a supermarket list. It helps not to erase these parts of her identity because her brain is erasing them for her. But she used to be like all of us too. Her soul, her core is just lost in neurological failures. But she used to be present in the moment with us. And the most noble thing that I can do as her granddaughter is to honor just that. Recognize them. Remember for them. Honor their true self and not their condition. Number 2, honoring and understanding sounds pretty easy, but it is 100% easier said than done. Impatience is the most inevitable emotion that I have felt throughout my grandmother's entire dementia process. Repetition happens all the time. Asking obvious questions happens all the time. Telling the same story, boy, that happens all the time. Making up a random story, that happens all the time. Once, my grandmother told me that my mom was unemployed and looking for a job, while my mom was giving a conference in the room next to us. The ugly part happens. In fact, it happens more than the nice parts do. Forgetful days are more common than lucid days. Bad news are often given more than good news. And being a non-doctor, in this entire situation, the lack of capability, yet the direct interaction will make you lose the entirety of your patience. Pretending like patience is an easy task will not make impatience go away. Number 3, what are we supposed to do with this inevitable impatience? 2 words. Accept it. We have to accept our impatience and our rage that comes with dealing with dementia. It is our way to process the condition. How could we not? We are human. We are a part of this relationship too. And we are a part of this conversation. It is not easy. In fact, I believe it is natural to feel all of the negative things that we feel when dementia is in the picture. It is our way to process the entire thing. And I have learned that the best way to deal with that burden is to acknowledge that the burden is heavy. We aren't the ones forgetting things. We have a role of remembering. We have a right to lose our patience sometimes. We have a right to be confused and angry and uncomfortable. Because at the end of the day, it will not change your reality. So embrace it, feel it, and forgive yourself for it. Self-forgiveness tends to be a counterintuitive concept for people because forgiveness implies that you as a person have done something wrong. On the contrary, we constantly label our actions as right or wrong when they necessarily aren't, especially when we have high expectations for ourselves. My family and I, we have set quite a few of those, and it has not been easy because we have pushed ourselves hard and constantly trying to find ways to avoid this reality. We can laugh, or we can ignore, we can investigate, or we can finally begin to accept it. The most valuable lesson that my grandmother ever gave me was that real change, enduring change, can only happen when you don't try to alter your reality. The reality is that my grandmother does not recognize me. My grandmother doesn't recognize her own room. And most of the time, she doesn't recognize herself. This reality won't change just because I try to avoid it. Dementia makes me sad. It makes me angry, and it makes me frustrated. And the worst part is that my grandmother, she was once like me. She used to be like me too. This did not used to be her. But staying in the past will not change my present. And my present, it makes me feel strong emotions, negative emotions. But once I forgive myself for them, I begin to accept them, and I grow from them. Embracing the pieces in front of you will help you see them as tools to build something new, something better. These emotions, these tools, they teach you things about yourself, about your values, about your experiences, about who you are. Don't try to change them. Make them a part of your life. But the step that comes before that is self-forgiveness. I urge you to try it someday. Embrace your anger. Feel your anger, but use your anger. Embrace your discomfort. Feel the discomfort, but use your discomfort. Embrace it, feel it, and most of all, use it. Thank you.